So it's 2 days before Singles Awareness Day, or if you have someone Valentine's. And we're going to spend some time just talking about dating. And then, and that's kind of the series we're in. So Patrick last week talked about singleness. Today we're talking about dating. Next week we're going to talk about sex and physical boundaries in dating. The week after that we're going to talk about sexual addictions. The week after that we're going to talk about homosexuality. And then we'll move away from the topic. So we're going to be in here for a while. And I know that this is like, you know, when I was in college, this is all I thought about pretty much. And so I'm married now, I'm on the other side, so I'm just going to drop some wisdom for you guys today. Thank you, Nina, for marrying me. A lot of this is just, again, my experience and some of the principles I've learned, not like hard Bible where, you know, you can, where basically you kind of take it or leave it. But these are some of my lessons. And then I also want to go into scripture a little bit later in this talk. But first, my premise, and if you've been with me for a few years, you know this. My premise when it comes to dating is that dating is not about changing who the person is, but discovering who they are. Dating isn't about changing who they are, but discovering who they are. And so a lot of people, when they walk into dating, right, they date for, I think they date for the wrong reasons. You know, they want to go on a date with someone because they're attracted to them and because that person kind of likes them and they won't get rejected, right? That's like the most basic reasons to date, or it's almost Valentine's Day. But I think that when we date, there should be a lot of intentionality behind it, right? Besides just having fun, furthering your friendship, there should be this intention for why are you dating versus being friends. And so for me, I think that dating allows for another level of discovery. And a lot of things I talk about, I think you can and should do this as friends first. But dating allows you to do it a little bit deeper. So if dating is about discovery, then I think that throughout this dating process, what you're really trying to ask is, who is this person? And should I marry them? Right? Is this someone I want to spend the rest of my life with? I remember going through junior high and college, and it was like this big Joshua Harris like craze that he wrote this book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And I don't think he intended to do this, but what he basically said was the ideal like Christian you know, dating scenario is to like date one girl and marry her, right? And date for marriage in the sense that like everything you do is on the track to like progress towards marriage. And I'm actually like, at least in terms of that interpretation of the book, I'm like a huge non-fan of that. I think a better question isn't like, are we moving towards marriage? I think that's a bad question. I think the primary question is this person I want to marry? And if it's not the person you want to marry, don't try to move towards marriage, right? Don't try to change this person so that you can marry them. I want you to date and discover this person, and if there's red and yellow flags, I want you to break up as fast as possible. You know, just start running. And I think that's what dating is for. It's to discover and then either progress or run. Does that make sense? And I think some of the best ways you could discover someone is by really just seeing them through different seasons. It takes time to really get to know someone, right? People can put on a facade for a while, for a couple of days, a couple of dates, but as you get to know them, spend a year with them, spend a year and a half, really seeing them through different seasons. I think a warning sign for me is someone who is in that beginning stages of dating, and the guy or girl is like really pushing hard for marriage. That might not happen in your context because you guys are, you know, in college, but I've seen it a lot, especially as you get older. Like, and it sounds really godly, it sounds like they're being super prayerful about it, but for me that's a warning sign because it's also possible that they're trying to hide stuff. You know, that if you go out with them long enough, that you'll see who they actually are. And so they're pushing for that as a facade, as a way to like get you to marry them and committed before you discover who they are. Like, there's this one girl that I really respect. She's like an older sister to me, and she mentored me in a few areas of my life. Really looked up to her. And then she started dating this guy, and within like 2 months, they got married. It was crazy. And I think if you're like in a charismatic Christian world, you know, it's celebrated, right? Like, I hope it's not at your church, but at her church, it was kind of like, oh man, like, they knew, like, they fell in love, they got all this, like, confirmation from, you know, quote-unquote God and their community, and, you know, the perfect Christian story. And then, like, he ended up, like, as I talked to her a few years later, she told me, like, she told me that the first time they slept together, you know, at their honeymoon, there was just this dark sense of like, I really don't know him. Like, I really don't know who he is. And as they progressed, even in their first couple years of marriage, she found that it's crazy, right? He talks about like wanting to be a missionary, like, you know, loving God, like, because she's like really godly, and she just, you know, how he fasted for 40 days, but as they progressed in marriage, he was like a druggie. Like, he was on hard drugs. And then he was physically abusive. And he cheated on her. I mean, just like a nightmare, right? But because she married him, she wanted to be faithful, and she just tried to push through it. She got pregnant right away, and it was a train wreck. And then a few years later, they got a divorce. And I was like so happy for her, right? Because it was such an extreme situation. I mean, I shared this story, and it's kind of like one of those traumatic stories you'll always remember, but I think there's a lot of varying degrees to that, right? So that's not the typical experience, but a lot of people rush into marriage without really getting a good sense of who the other person is. Not just like on a superficial level, but the core of them, the parts that don't change very often, the parts that are long-term. And so those are the things I want you to discover as you're dating. And how you can discover these things is by walking with them through different seasons, right? See them when they're sick. Like when they're feeling like crap, they have a headache, you know, they barely get out of bed. How do they react, you know? Are they whining and complaining? Do they go into immediate depression, right? Are they like okay, right? Is some parts of their character intact? Because when you see people in their low points, you get to hit the core of who they are. Like, well, everyone looks good when they're doing well, but when you can dig through the pleasantries, when you could dig through the good times, when you could dig through things going right, and you hit failure, you hit sickness, you hit frustration, you hit a season of their life where they're overwhelmed by stress, you get to see some of their core. And so, yeah, be a supportive friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, but really look to discover them. Look to discover them. I really am fascinated by people when they're angry. And I want to see, like, when they're angry, what happens? Like, do they fly off the handlebars? Like, do they get physically violent? Or are they, there's like a couple, there's different types of anger, right? When people experience confrontation and anger, they either run, so they're runners. Like me and Nina, we're both runners. Like, we're passive aggressive, and like when we get mad at each other, we just kind of want space. And sometimes, like, she wants space, meaning Australia, you know, like the other side of the world. And then there's other people who are confronters, right? They're people who want to come together, but they want to fight. And then the healthiest place, and you don't get there often or quickly, but is compromise, right? So when you're in conflict with this person, how do they react? How are they when they're successful? When things are going their way? You know, do they get boastful and prideful? Is it all about them and their accomplishments and pointing to themselves? Or do they have a humble attitude about it? When they beat you in Jenga, are they like throwing bricks at your face like, I'm the best, you suck, right? Or are they like, hey, good game, right? Is there a sense of maturity to some of those things? I mean, you can do it playfully, but then some people take it real serious. I've actually, I have a best girlfriend, you know, we grew up together, and she banned like games from me for like a good year. Like one day I was being such a brat, and then she's like, listen, I'm not gonna play games with you for like a year. And I was like, seriously, a whole year? And then like literally she counted like calendar days, and so I didn't have anyone play Jenga with for a long time. So how are they when they do well? And then how responsible are they? You know, look at their workload. Do they get crushed under a little bit of pressure? Or are they looking to like are they doing well in school? Do they have their lives together? And when things get overwhelming, do they manage their time better, or do they just totally stress out? What do they do with their free time? Are they taking responsibility for their families? Like when you hear about their family in trouble, do they just complain about it? Are they just victimized by it? Or do they step up and they say, hey, like, my mom's not doing well, but I'm trying to go home like more often to take care of her. Or my sister, she cried because her prom date left her, so I took her out to the movies. Versus my mom's doing well, so I'm staying away from the house, I'm gonna, avoid her. And my sister's prom date left her, so I made fun of her for half an hour and then I left. Like, how do they respond in those situations? Do they take responsibility? Also for their own like misbehaviors, right? All of us mess up. We're all we're gonna make mistakes, right? So we're not looking for the perfect person, but I'm just asking you to go on a journey of discovery, primarily instead of change, right? And as you discover them, I think one of the biggest positives a person can have is owning their failures. There's so many people that I've met who, when things go wrong or when they mess up, they always look at external circumstances, right? It's everyone's fault. But man, I really respect someone who just takes ownership and they're like, dude, I messed that up. Like, it's totally my bad. I'm going to grow from that. I think that's huge, right? That's really big. I think the second thing that's really big is that they're willing to apologize. Dude, you're going to offend your wife through marriage. You're going to make some big mistakes. The people who are willing to own it and really apologize for it, those are people that, that's what allows growth, right? That's what allows the relationship to progress. So the first thing in terms of observation is observe them in different seasons. When you're dating and even in your friendship, like, I don't think that a lot of this needs to happen in dating. There's so many people that I was interested in, and I started this observation process because we have a relationship, we have friendship. I don't need to just jump in, right? Or I build a friendship with them, and I just start observing these things. And then I like say, oh, I don't think, and then I don't have to go through the whole like getting together, all the romance, and then breaking up, right? I can just do it while observing them as friends and not go through all the heartache of that. So yeah, be attracted to someone, like them, but then as early as possible, start the observation process, even as friends. The other thing I really look for when I observe someone is how do they treat and how do their close friends and family talk about them? Like, I want to know, like, their closest friends, like, what do they think of this person? Their sister, their mom, their dad, like, how do they treat their parents? How do they treat their siblings? Because your real self, I mean, I'm not sure if I've yelled at anyone else except for my family, right? Like, your family sees the absolute worst of you. And if you could get to observe their family and their interactions and how they talk to their parents, how they relate to them, that goes a long way. I want to see them when they have like enemies. Like, how do they talk about their enemies? I really respect and would love to would love you guys to date someone who, when they're like pissed off at someone, they're able to pick themselves up and say, yeah, but that person might be having a bad day. Or maybe that person isn't always like this. Or maybe that person, just was in a rush somewhere. Versus like taking that person and devaluing them to nothing, right? That all they are evil because they offended me. That's a big difference. And how do they fight with their friends? Is it like they break out the brass knuckles and they just go for jugulars all day and eye gouges, right? Or when they're fighting with people, like, hey, they try to address the issue. They're willing to compromise. They're willing to admit their flaw, their part of it, right? They're willing to say, when they're fighting with friends, they see the value in the friendship, and they're not willing just to abandon this friendship. And I think that's extremely important because in some part of your dating relationship and your marriage, in many parts of it, if you guys get close enough, she or he will be your enemy. Like, you will look at your husband or your wife and be like, I just hate this fool, you know, like, they really hurt me, you're about to go to war, right? And I want to see how that person goes to war before I marry them, and one day I'm their enemy, and it's unavoidable. It is completely unavoidable. One day you're going to be the worst enemy of your husband and wife. And if they're going for jugular shots before, they're going to go for jugular shots now, right? And so that's something I'm always observing. Like, when they're mad at someone, when they're enemies with their friends, when they're enemies with their enemies, how do they speak of them? Is there still this undergirding of respect? Is there the ability to go around the corner and see from the other person's perspective? That's a mature man or woman. And that's something I definitely observe. And then another thing I observe is power dynamics. I'm really big on power dynamics, actually. And what I mean by that is, how do they treat people who are lower than them? And again, you get to see someone's core when you see them in a position of power. And it could be really subtle. It could be, you know, in a friendship group at Epic. And how do they interact with the guy or the girl who's new? Right? Do they leave them out? Do they feel like, hey, this person isn't important, they're not in the in crowd? Or do they go and reach out to them? How do they treat the guy or girl who is unpopular or awkward or a little bit, you know, like estranged, right? Like in their friendship group, like any friendship group you walk around, there's the kid, there's the guy who, you know, everyone rallies around. And then a lot of times there's like people who just kind of follow the pack, right? And you know who they are, or you know they want to be there, but no one else wants them to be there, right? Raise your hand if you're that person. And right, I value people who are able to like look at those power dynamics, and they're the ones who bring that guy in. They're the ones who defend that person. They're the ones who try to mentor him or her. That says volumes. When you go to a restaurant and it's a waiter or waitress, are they polite to this person, even when they don't have to be? When they see a homeless person walk by, do they treat them with decency? Or do they just like look down on them? Power dynamics are something I'm a keen observer of. It takes a while, it takes about a year, I think, to get any real sense of a person's depth. So I strongly suggest like even talking too much about marriage from before that. And I would say, you know, Nina's pastor gave her some really good advice. He said, keep both eyes open when you're dating, and when you get married, close one eye. You know, like in the dating part, like really keep both eyes open. And then another really good quote I like is, love is blind, but best friends are not. And so ask your best friends what they think. And I think sometimes we just want support. We just want undying, blind, ignorant support. But if your friends, the ones that really care, and you ask them for honest feedback, they'll tell you. They'll tell you if they feel like this is a person that would be good for you or not. By the way, you can text in questions about this, and then at the end I'll like address them. All right. Another thing I think that's really important to discover while you're seeing or dating each other or observing them as friends is discover whether they have a real relationship with God. You know, it's easy to play church. It's easy to be born into a Christian family and not really like love God. And I want to challenge you guys to really start looking for those things. And if they do love God, God is going to be integrated into all those other seasons, right? Into their failures, into their pains, into their successes. He will be interwoven into those things. As you walk alongside of them, look at their conversation and see if God is a part of that. If He is a part of their story, and how have they served God in the past, right? If they've say they're a Christian, but they've never served at all the kingdom of God, then you know it says something that they're still trying to grow in their faith. Because at the end of the day, if the crux of our life, right, as Jesus says, is to love God and love people, then that's a question we need to bring into every facet of our lives. And especially into dating, into marriage, right? Someone that you're going to be yoked with. You want to ask, does this person help me love God more? And does this person allow me to love others more? Or when I'm with him, am I isolating myself? When I'm with him, am I falling into sin and not able to fully give my life to God? One of the reasons why I really fell in love with Nina was because there was this guy in our group. And I have a gift for loving people pretty easily, or liking people and kind of all kinds. But there's this one guy who really annoyed me, right? So I was really annoyed by him. I remember I was complaining to her about this guy. And then she just kind of brought him in perspective. And she's just like, oh, he has some growing up to do. It's going to be okay. She sees potential in him. And she just really made me love him more. And I was like, wow, I have found a girl that makes me love people that I have a hard time loving. Right? Versus yeah, he does suck. Let's just kick him out, or someone that you like and then she's judgmental too, and now you don't like them, or they gossip about that. God more and love people more. I think if you're a Christian and Christ is the center of your life, then you have to ask yourself, there's all kinds of realms of compatibility, right? But if you're a Christian, and God is kind of at the foundation of everything you do, then that needs to be the most important point of compatibility. Because if you're dating someone who's not a Christian, your purposes are different, right? Your ethics are different. Why you do ethics are different. What you're going for in life is different. Your priorities are different. And so I think even if if you come and you're not a Christian, I would suggest that you want to find someone who's compatible with you as well, right? Who has a lot of the same moral codes and standards. And so it's just about looking for someone that really fits where you are in your life and what you believe most fundamentally. When it comes to dating and discovering the other person, I think an even more fundamental question is, so much of dating is wrapped around finding the right guy or girl, right? Looking for that person that fits all of the qualifications you want, that is able to complete you, so on and so forth. How I Met Your Mother is this long journey of Ted filtering through all these girls, and finally, what's her name? No one? The mom. We meet her. She's so amazing. Anyways, finally we meet this girl. And I think one of the things that Ted found in his journey, which is why I love that show, is because he realized that there are these single episodes, every other season, where he stopped and he said, it was because I wasn't ready for her. It was because even if I met her, she wouldn't like me. It was because I didn't grow into the person that could be her husband. Oftentimes we feel like this whole marriage, dating, falling in love thing is about finding the right person and discovering them. But even before that, it's about knowing who we are and discovering ourselves. And being the kind of person that person will want to date, right? And so before you go and start looking around and discovering people, I would say first ask whether you are ready to date. Whether you're in a good place, that you're not dating because you have this gaping hole in your heart, because you're terribly lonely, because you need, you're desperate and you need to be filled by something. I think all of those things God wants to fill in us. And we date best when we're dating to give. We date best when we're there to love someone else. And we feel man, if she were to date me, I think she would be a better person. I think I could get her to love God a little bit more. I think I could pull potential out of her and she could pull potential out of me. And it's not out of this massive deficit of love and of loneliness and of hurt. Right? Those things we need to bring to God and have Him fill those areas of our life before we bring those things to another person. Some of us, God's calling for us to have a season of singleness. And I know Patrick talked about that a lot. But there's so many points in my life I wish I just stopped and said, Wilson, it's okay to be single. And instead of like being completely intoxicated and enthralled with finding a girlfriend, I wish there were moments where I could just step back and say, maybe God's doing something better in me as a single person than if I were to be dating someone. And I think it's so easy to miss those seasons, because Valentine's Day is coming up, right? But maybe God has you single for a reason. And what if we sat back and we say, God, if this is your season for me, let me embrace it. And let me learn in unique ways in this season that are more difficult or I can't learn when I'm dating. So that when I do date, I've grown. I'm a better person. And now the person I can attract, hopefully like attract like. When I see a really messed up couple, usually both of them are really messed up. And when I see a really healthy couple, again, rule of thumb, most of the time both of them are really healthy. A healthy person can identify unhealth. And they won't get in that type of relationship with a person who's really unhealthy or abusive. But people who are unhealthy don't identify unhealth. And they will go out and continue to have abusive relationships. So as you grow and mature and become more healthy, you're able to attract a mature and healthier person. So if you're single right now, talk to God and ask, maybe God wants to bring you through a season of healing, where it's just you and Him. Maybe you broke up with someone, maybe you had a hard past with your parents, maybe there's a sin that He wants to deal with in your life, and maybe this is a season where He's just dealing with you one-on-one, and He wants you to grow. And another person will kind of detract and take focus away from that. Maybe it's a great season, a spiritual season for you, and He wants to open up more opportunities for you to serve. Patrick talked about that last time. Maybe it's a time where you're discovering your calling and you're discovering God's vision for your life. And it's a little bit, maybe a lot harder, depending on the type of relationship you have, like the depth of it, to do that with someone else, right? Like when I met Nina, I wanted to accommodate to her because I love her, right? Any girl I really felt like I love, we're trying to fit these puzzle pieces together. And I'm trying to mold my life and shape my direction towards her, and she's trying to do that for me. But we could lose ourselves in that if we don't know where God's calling us first. Does that make sense? If you know where God's calling you first, then you could look for people who are going towards that call. But if you don't know and she doesn't know and you haven't discovered it, or you know but she doesn't know, you could pull her into something that she was never made to do, right? So I would say wait on God's timing, and wait till you're in a place where you really feel like you're able to help another person grow in their faith. Self-discovery. A lot of people have their this is the things I want list, right? Here's the 54 items that I hope my future husband or wife is. And I didn't qualify for 2 of Nina's. One was knows how to speak Korean. And the second one was, because anyways. And the second one was not a pastor, right? So I broke 2. But she had 53 of them. So, that's one of the best test scores I've ever had. So yeah, have a list of things that you want, but really look for things that you absolutely hate. I think a hate list is much more beneficial than a love list. Things that you want versus things you hate. Go for the things you hate first. Prioritize those things, because those things will mess you up. For me, one of my top hate lists is anger, right? I really don't like it when people are overtly confrontational and angry with me. I kind of, my mom was like that. Every time I just spilled milk a couple of days ago, and I'm still traumatized when I spill milk, because I'm just ready to get totally chewed out for spilling milk or coffee or any type of liquid, right? And so I go into fetal position, I shut down, I start crying inside, and so Like, I can't marry a person with anger issues. And all of us are going to have different issues that we can deal with and that we can't deal with. Right? So find out what you can't deal with. And don't marry that person. Grow in it, you know, find other people who will challenge you to it, but don't marry it. Does that make sense? So what is on your hate list? What are things that you absolutely can't stand? Let's see. All right, almost done. The last part is, let's see. The last part is really thinking about, as you think about personal growth, which I think, again, is probably the centerpiece of, and the most controllable aspect when it comes to getting a healthy girlfriend or boyfriend, pursuing a healthy relationship, being happily and healthily married. One of the most important and critical and controllable thing you can do is intentionally growing. When I look at, if you have your Bibles, you could turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. First Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. We're going to blitz through this real fast. You know, oftentimes when I read this passage, very famous, I thought that love was a verb, right? Love is when I do these things for someone else. So it says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not arrogant or rude, it does not insist on its own way, it is not irritable or resentful, it does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. And I thought, you know, one day when I'm able to, like, when I do this for someone, I'm loving them. And that's what love is. Love is doing all these things for a person. And that's true, but I think a more fundamental part of this description of love isn't how we love someone, isn't a verb, but it's a noun. It's who we are, right? In 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, it says, God is love. And I think that totally changes the dynamic of what love is. That it's not just a feeling. It's not just what you do or express to another person. But love is who you are. Love is character. Love is your person. And so when you look at this list and you want to say, God, I want to love someone. Love comes from the core of yourself. And if you're able to be patient, to be a kind person, to be someone who doesn't envy or boast and isn't arrogant, if you're able to not keep records of wrong, if you start developing those characteristics, you're able to love someone fully, right? My aunt loves me, but she's extremely critical, abusive. You know, like, I actually had to ask her to not be a part of my life anymore. Actually, she did that to me, but I asked her to calm down, you know? Like, we're out in public, and she's, like, scolding me, and I'm, like, 27 years old, and I was like, okay, this can't happen anymore. But that's her loving me. If you're not able to grow your character to be love, to embody love, your love will be fractured, and your love can even be abusive. You know, I met this guy doing like community service, and he's like, you know, I didn't show up for a court date because of a traffic thing, so there you go. But he was there because he got drunk and he beat his wife, right? And then he was just telling me, and we were able to pray together, but he said, I love her so much, but when I get drunk, like, I just can't control myself. And it's because it's his character. I also think about this. You know, I think about how the more godly we are, the more compatible we are. Right? We don't usually put those things together. But the more godly you are, the more like love you are, the more compatible you are. How many people are compatible with anger? Right? How many people of you are compatible with people who hold grudges? How many of you are compatible with people who are mean? No one's compatible with those things. But as we become more like God, we become more compatible. Isn't that phenomenally brilliant? I think it's just brilliant. That the more like Jesus we are, the more compatible we are. Because everyone wants to find someone patient. Everyone wants to find someone selfless. Everyone wants to find someone who will hope and protect and care for them. We are transformed into love by finding that God first loves us. Right? We're able to love, we're able to be loved because He loves us. And if you think about your inability to love others, like the parts of love that are fractured when you express it, it's because you weren't loved in that way. You hadn't received that love before. Our parents, the love they give us is always fractured because they're human, they're imperfect. And so when we are loved, we are able to only give fractured love. But if we can be loved by God in a whole way, then we're able to be transformed to be more whole. And then we're able to love others more holistically as well. And we become compatible. So those are my thoughts. I'm going to see if there's any questions. So we'll try to end in like less than 10 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. So you can text in even now if you want to.
First one is, does God ever call you to date someone not Christian?
Great question.
Or no, sorry, does God ever call you to date someone?
To date someone?
Yeah.
Call you to date someone? I think so. But I think it's extremely, when you make those type of decisions, you're not going to be able to flip to like Leviticus chapter 5, uncharted Bible territory, and be like, and God said date Nina, right? So we always have to hold callings like that with the sense of like errancy. Like I could be wrong, and I have been wrong. There's many times in my life where I thought this girl would be the one I would marry. 4th grade, it happened twice, 6th grade, it happened 3 times. It happened like 4 times a month pretty much if you wanted to average it out. Okay, so don't jump into that. Definitely, yeah. So I think like even if that were to happen, just hold that huge tension of you might be wrong, and I have been wrong many more times than I was right. And I would say approaching dating like that is just so much pressure, probably unnecessary. So I can't say God never does that, but I would say try not to think in those terms. Is that okay? Next question.
Yeah. For people that fall in love so easily, what advice would you give them? And for the ones that get into relationships way too often?
Okay, great question. Well, love is like, love and infatuation are very different. And I think you really mean infatuation, because you don't fall in love that often, I don't think. But you get infatuated a lot. And I've gotten infatuated a lot. So I think one wise thing to do is to really try to get to know this person. Because if you don't know them, even as a friend, there's so many things that you could superimpose into that person, right? So like, if there's a girl I see, non-married Wilson, okay? Yeah, for the most part. Anyways, non-married Wilson, the Gracie guy. Anyways, so non-married Wilson, there's a girl I see, and I don't know her, but she's very attractive, and she's probably Christian, and now everything I hope her to be, I've superimposed onto her. We all do this, right? That's why girls like quiet guys. Because you could just put everything you want into that person. Because he doesn't talk much. And and like, the guys who talk, you know what they're thinking, and they're unattractive because they open their mouth. But the guys who don't talk, you'd be like, oh, he's so quiet. He probably loves puppies, serves orphans, and is an amazing chef. Just guessing, like those are problems. So I'd say like really get to know that person as a human, in their strengths, in their weaknesses, in their flaws, and then also try to stay on the same page. Calm down, right? Don't use love. Just be interested, and don't let your affections grow to the point where they're gonna find you like completely creepy, right? Like, hi, my name's Wilson. I've stalked you for about 3 years. I've named our children, and I want to marry you right now. And I know none of us have done that, but we've done it mentally, haven't we? All of us have like mentally married people that we don't even know. So like, really try to be realistic. Okay, if they're at 1, don't go. Guard your heart. You know, contain your emotions. Try not to like blitz past like 5, 6, and 7. Be at 2. Be at 3. Show them you're interested. You know, give them time to grow in their affection. There's this one girl I was completely infatuated with. I did all the wrong things because I'm like this like very non-aggressive Asian guy at the time. So I just liked her for a year or so. And like when I finally worked up the courage to ask her out, like she was thinking coffee and I was thinking like Catalina, right? She was thinking like a 30-40 minute date and I was thinking like, you know, 15 hours from sunrise to sunset. That's not good. It sounds romantic like never, okay? To like in real life. So did I even answer your question?
I don't know.
Okay, let's pretend it did.
Okay, these 2 questions are one and the same, but someone asked about what do you think about missionary dating, and what do you think about dating someone that is not Christian?
Yeah, so I kind of like addressed that hopefully a little bit, but I think it's not a good idea because a big part of it is discovery, right? You're trying to discover the person, not change the person. And so if you're willing to marry someone who's a non-Christian, if you're not willing to marry someone who's a non-Christian, you should not be willing to date them because that's the discovery process. To discover who they are so to whether you can marry them. And I think a non-Christian, like, you probably don't want to marry a Christian either. Like, it's just, trust me, it's not a good idea. Like, you're going to have a lot of conflicts, a lot of fundamental life philosophical conflicts, whether you're Christian or non-Christian, going into that relationship. Because the most fundamental pieces of your life will be different. You know, how you perceive purpose, how you perceive ethics, how you perceive reality will be different, right? If you're a Christian, you believe that there's a soul, that there's this place, this spiritual being that governs us, who's invisible, that you worship. I mean, that's a completely different reality than someone who's Buddhist or someone that's atheist. It's a different reality. I mean, if you're seriously dating that person, how do you respect each other's realities, right? How do you come together and play basketball, but say, we have a different view of what reality is, right? I mean, I know you guys probably won't think that far. You're like, oh, but she's attractive, right? But I think like, when you really come down to those things, they're so fundamental that it's hard to build off of that. What truth is, right? How you derive truth. I mean, those are some fundamental questions, and you can have fun together. You could be attracted together, but to have like a real deep relationship, if because I can only speak from a Christian's perspective, if you're a strong Christian and the mantra of your life is to love God and love others, like how do you reconcile that with someone whose life motto is not that, right? And like a non-Christian's life motto will not be to love God, maybe love others, right? Maybe. But definitely not love God, not the God we know. That's the difference. That's just an objective difference. And then also I think about 2 Corinthians, I want to say 14, where it says, don't be yoked together with someone who doesn't believe in God. And yoke means like being tied together closely. Because when you're dating and married, you're going to pull and prod on each other, right? You're going to like influence each other. And so if you're going fundamentally in a different direction and they're going to go in a different direction, neither of you are able to fully do what you feel is right. You're just going to be pulling on each other. And so I know some of us aren't Christian here. I hope you don't feel like disrespected. I just want to objectively say that for you, if I was a non-Christian in your shoes, I think that I have a lot of fundamental like divide between myself and Christianity in terms of that type of relationship. Like, let's explore, let's have conversation, let's try to understand this. But until there's agreement in those fundamental levels, I think it's hard to pursue that kind of like tight-knit, let's share life together and think about marriage relationship.
You mentioned guarding your heart. What do you mean by that? What does that look like?
Okay, guarding your heart. So I think like, okay, I'm gonna do that next week.
Okay.
One more question. One or two more that you like.
Okay. Is it bad to pursue someone sooner than you know because you fear that someone else might date them while you still
Okay, so that's a great question. Ish. Yeah, not that great. Okay, fine. Just kidding. No. But okay, I think fundamentals. Okay, fundamentally, most bare bones like philosophy is this: until they're married, they're not taken. That's just how it is. Like God does not. This is what I look at. How I look at it. God doesn't honor like dating or engagement. He honors marriage. That's a lifelong commitment. For me, if I was dating Nina and she like started dating someone else, I mean, there's a lot of things she's broken with me, right? I think this is how I see it. Okay, there's two ways she could do that. She could not talk to me about it and just start dating someone and then date both of us and I'm cheated on. And I would be really grateful because that's like a deep character issue that I wouldn't want to have married anyways, and I've deeply misjudged her. And I would be butthurt, okay? So let's not do like that. The second way she could do this is she really just feels more interested in someone else. And she's like, hey Wilson, I'm gonna break up with you and date this other person because I think that they're a better fit for me. And I actually, in our dating relationship, gave her permission to do that. Some of it was me being super cocky. And some of it was me really believing that we're not bound together in a lifelong commitment, and I want her to date the best possible person for her. I'm pretty sure it's me, but I could be wrong, you know? But I wasn't wrong. We got married. Okay, now when you take a step beyond that, I think that the second step is bro code, right? And I'm a believer of bro code. I think if you're a good friend to someone, so all of my friends, like we grew up together, we're really close. You know, we were each other's groomsmen, all of that. When they liked a girl, I just kind of laid off of her, you know, for just bro code's sake. And I just felt like if they don't work out, but he has to kind of pursue her too. Like that's the other thing. Like he can't just put her on hold like indefinitely, you know. Like he has to like try to pursue her and you know, try to win her over. And if he like you know, goes out with her, that's great. If he doesn't go out with her, then, you know, you rotate, right? Like, that's kind of how I feel about it. But, I mean, that's so subjective. But I think in your community, in your friendships, think about, like, you know, like, what's the bro code here? And for the sake of fellowship and, you know, friendship and stuff, try not to, like, do something that they just didn't see coming. That's kind of how I feel. But, again, no scripture whatsoever. Go ahead. Last question.
Yeah, this one's a fun one.
Okay.
What was your favorite date with Nina?
Oh, that's so cute. All right. Great ending question. Okay, so one time she lives here, and then if you drive like maybe 2 miles, there's a hill, right? So we go up there, and then like we were praying together that day. And then I was like, man, I think I can make it all the way down to your apartment without using any gas, like just on neutral, right? It's like 2 miles away. We go down, like you go down most of Pathfinder, and then you end up like, well, so we did it. Like we were going down and like getting, and then we were like turning in, like it was slowing down, right? We were going like 50, 40, 30, 20, and then like we were like inching towards her driveway. And then it just like started slowing. I'm like, we're not gonna make it. So I started like doing this, you know, trying to get some momentum going. And then like it like slowly, and then there was like the speed bump. And so she opens the door and she just starts paddling. And then I was like, man, I'm gonna marry that girl. So we paddled our